Right, you guys, as you can see by the thumbnail, I'm back with another one like the other one. And I'm going to get straight into this story. This is going to be another quick story. I told you guys I was going to start doing these flash stories. I'm going to start putting them out as much as I can. Like I said in the video that I put out earlier, I know I haven't been putting out a lot of content on my channel, but there's a lot that's been going on the home front that's been pulling me away from YouTube. You know, I don't want you guys thinking that I'm losing interest or that I'm falling off or that I'm letting my channel fall by the wayside. That's not happening. There's still a lot of work to be done. For those of you that have been with me for the long haul, you guys stay the course. You know, when certain things happen, you guys just got to understand that I have no other choice but to step away for a minute and to deal with it. There's nobody else to do it but me. It's my responsibility. So I'm asking you to just bear with me. Anyway, I'm just wasting time. I'm just rambling on, repeating myself now. So without further ado, let me get into this story. So this is a story that caught my interest the other day. It's about a deputy that got caught up in the LA County jail in a major smuggling operation. And even though this stuff happens across the country, everywhere, in county jails, in prisons, in federal prisons, state prisons, all across the country, this story is unique based on the amount that this guy was trying to bring in and some of the other details of the story that I'm going to get into. One of the main things that was interesting about this story is that this particular deputy, Michael Meer, was also part of Operation Safe Jails, which is a specialized unit that's tasked with investigating, classifying, and housing high-level gang members. High-level gang members such as the Mexican Mafia. So essentially the same gang members that he's in charge of investigating are the same ones he's charged with in a criminal complaint to conspire to smuggle clavo into the LA County jail. But that's only part of it. Let me try to put this in context for you guys. So what Operation Safe Jails does is they monitor and listen to phone calls that are made by documented gang members and those that are considered their associates. So basically all the shot callers, the leaders, or the guys that are on the max tiers, it's their responsibility to monitor, to keep track of all their activity, to classify these guys, and to basically investigate them for crimes that they commit while they're in the county jail. They listen for gang activity, for smuggling operations, and for assaults that might be in play both inside and outside the jail. That's what they specialize in. But before I get into the intricate details of this story, let me just say this. Obviously, like in any other part of the jail, you have different types of deputies that work in different parts of the jail. You obviously got the ones that like to bring their problems to work with them. They like to come in, shit all over everyone's day. They like to cause a lot of animosity with the inmates. Their whole get down, their whole agenda is to just create a lot of chaos. These were probably the guys that got their lunch money taken when they were in school. These are also the guys that probably won't live for 5 years after their retirement, because it's a proven fact that these types of COs that are high strung, that are all wound up, they don't live for 5 years after they retire because they go from a high stress type of environment to home where they're really not around that stuff no more. And that drop in stress is what ends up taking them out. But either way, then you also have those deputies that get it. After being there for a period of time, they come to realize that the best way to do their job is to do it in a stress-free environment where there's no animosity, there's no stress, there's no tension. That is better all the way around for everyone to have a problematic stress-free day without all the bullshit. And you know, when you have these kind of COs that bring that type of negative energy to work with them, it really does rub off on everyone else. It has an effect on the whole unit. Because I remember when I was doing time and I would see who was working that day, if it was one of those types of COs, I would be like, oh man, it's gonna be a long day today. I'm just gonna kick back, try to stay out of this fool's way and get through these next 12 hours. And when you had cool COs that would work the tier, the day would fly by fast. The ones that didn't come back there and hit cells or try to create conflict with some of us on the tier, the day would fly by. It would be a stress-free day. So it really does have an effect on the entire tier. That negative energy is contagious. Anyways, like I was saying, these COs that get it after being there for a while, the ones that would rather sit there and watch their DVD players for 12 hours, not cut no paperwork, and not have any kind of stress between them and the inmates, And what better way is there to do that than by establishing a positive rapport with the inmates? You guys have heard me talk about this in several of my stories in the past where I've referred to a symbiotic working relationship or a symbiotic rapport, something that's mutually beneficial for not just the inmates, but also for the deputies as well. On the flip side, it's beneficial for the inmates to have somewhat of a positive rapport or an open line of communication with the deputies or the officers that work on these tiers, because then they don't have to worry about excessive cell searching, losing their contraband, or just having conflict with some of the deputies that work there in that environment. They're also given the latitude to run their program without interference, and that's the way you want it. Because I'll tell you like this, whether the administration likes it or not, the inmates are going to run their program and run their politics the way they want to run them. It doesn't matter what they do, what they say, any amount of searching, any amount of threats, any amount of write-ups, nothing is going to change that. But trust me, it's better to have COs in pocket, ones that you have a mutual understanding with, so that they step back and allow you to run your program the way you're going to run it. A lot of the times when I was on some of these max tiers in the county jails, or when I was in the SHU, and we used to conduct ourselves with a lot of respect. They were good, solid tiers. And the COs used to like the way that we conducted ourselves. They liked the way that we programmed. Just based on that alone, they would come in and they would tell us things like, hey, you guys got contraband, put your shit up because they're coming through tonight. You guys are due to get hit, they're coming through. So just based on the fact that we ran a tight program, they would give us information like that. And that's beneficial to us, hands down. Because like I said, nobody wants to lose their contraband. We like our contraband. So that worked in our favor. And I know that there's going to be some people that are going to say this is a form of working with the K9s, or this is a form of fraternization. But those of you that might say that, you're only saying that because you don't know what you're talking about. So apparently this Deputy Meiser, he worked in a part of the LA County Jail where they house what they classified as Mexican Mafia shot callers and their associates. I'm only familiar with 1750, an area of the LA County Jail that you guys have heard me talk a lot about in some of my other stories. But either way, it was on one of the max tiers in the LA County Jail. So at some point, Meiser, he encounters an individual that they identified as being a member of the Mexican Mafia, or a close associate named Jose Rodriguez, who also went by the name Benji, from a gang called the Pacuema Project Boys. I obviously don't know how their interaction went because I wasn't there. But at some point, Meiser comes to realize that Benji has some status within the jail, that he's a leader, and that he has a voice amongst the Sureños. And I'm sure in his mind that at some point he realized that it was probably to his benefit to establish a positive rapport with Benji as well. Again, let me try to put this in the right context because I don't want you guys to misconstrue what I'm trying to tell you guys. I'm not saying that these COs or these deputies become groupies, but a lot of times they gravitate towards individuals that have status. Individuals who they come to realize are leaders within the jails or within the prisons. And most of the time, guys like Benji, they have a lot of charisma, some of the same qualities that led to them being placed in the position that they're in. For Meiser, he knows that if he can establish a strong rapport with someone like Benji, that he can maintain some level of control over the other inmates by using Benji as a conduit. At least in his mind, that's what he's thinking. So this Deputy Meiser and Benji, they established this symbiotic rapport, something that takes time, and it's a gradual process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. I guarantee you, you're not going to find any deputy that will come into a work environment like this that will hit a tier, and from one week to the next, he's going to start bringing in contraband. It just doesn't work like that. It takes time. And deputies, they forge bonds or relationships with other people just like anyone else does. The only difference with them is that they have a uniform and a badge on. That's it. Take yourself as an example. When you build a rapport or some level of trust with anyone, regardless of who it is, how does that come about? How does it happen? It's a process, right? Where you build up a level of trust and a level of respect with that individual. Again, I wasn't there, so I don't know exactly how it happened, but based on my own experiences, I'd be willing to bet that it started out with something as small as common conversation. Something like talking about sports, world politics, or something along those lines. And then from there, it just continued to escalate. It snowballed and it progressed. Here's a hypothetical. Maybe Benji's an artist, and every time Meiser walked by his cell, he would walk by, he'd see Benji drawing. And one time when he walked by, he stops and he asks Benji, "Hey, every time I walk by, I always see you drawing, man. Let me check out your artwork." Whatever it was that sparked that initial conversation, it was built on common ground. And this is the other thing. Whenever you have a deputy or a CO that works in this type of environment on a tier like this, for an extended period of time, whether it is or isn't their intention to forge bonds or to connect with inmates, it's gonna happen. It's human nature. And keep this in mind, you're talking about dealing with some of the most intelligent, sophisticated inmates in these kind of environments. I'm not talking about no scrubs. These are leaders, shot callers, guys that are hooked up. I used to think that I was pretty good at manipulation, but some of these individuals can take manipulation to another level, to the point to where you might be guarded against manipulation, but they're so good that they're manipulating you and you don't even know it. But again, whenever you're around someone for an extended period of time, you start to connect with them. It's called the Stockholm Syndrome. Patty Hearst is a prime example of it. After being held by her captors for an extended period of time, eventually she began to bond with them, up to the point to where she began participating in some of the robberies that they were doing. Are you guys following me? Okay. So at some point, Benji, he obviously felt confident enough that he had established enough trust with this deputy Meiser to the point to where he ended up approaching him and propositioning him to bring something into the jail. And when I say propositioned, I obviously mean in the context of illegal contraband for an enticing amount of money. He might have told Meiser something like, "Hey, we all got financial obligations. We all got to pay bills. We all got to pay taxes. I'm giving you an opportunity to make a lot of money really fast for barely doing anything." And who knows how Meiser might have initially reacted to being propositioned like that. He might have said something like, "You know what? This job means everything to me. I got a family to support. I got kids. I would never jeopardize my job for anybody or anything. I don't cross those lines. I appreciate the offer, but I'm good." He might have initially responded like that, trying to give off the impression that he's a straight arrow, that he wouldn't do nothing like that he would never cross those kind of lines. Only to come back 2 or 3 days later, after playing possum, telling them something like, "Hey, tell me a little bit more about what you would ask me about." Because he might have stewed on it for a couple of days and realized that, you know what, this right here might be the solution to my financial quandaries. Being financially strapped, not being able to make your house payments, not being able to make your car payments, living from check to check, barely bringing enough money home, being maxed out on all your credit cards, not being able to pay one of your kids' tuitions to put them through college. These are the types of things that can push somebody over that edge. And these are the type of things that can make even the most meekest of people cross that line. The lure of making a lot of money fast or coming up with a solution to all your financial problems is sometimes enough to make almost anyone entertain the thought. Who knows? Maybe he took the bait right there when Benji first propositioned him. Maybe he felt that they had established enough trust to ask him to tell him a little bit more about what he was talking about right there. But here's something else to think about. If you proposition a deputy like this about bringing illegal contraband in to a county jail, and 2 or 3 days go by and you don't hear nothing, you don't get a write-up, that could mean either one of two things. Either you got him and he's still kicking it around, or he's just one of those types of deputies that has no interest in getting dragged into a messy criminal case. Because they have set protocol that they're supposed to follow when they're approached like that. They're supposed to document it and either take it up with their sergeant or their lieutenant. But regardless of how it happened, at some point, Meiser, he agrees to do it and he starts bringing it in. Before he got caught up and before they caught on to what he was doing, I'd be willing to bet that he probably brought it in probably at least a half dozen times before he ended up getting busted. You know, I don't want to put the cart before the horse and tell you guys what happened, but eventually they ended up getting busted trying to bring in $250,000 worth of black. That's a lot of D. And you don't just start out like that. That's not something that you bring in on the first trip. You work your way up to that point. That was the mother lode. $250,000 off the bat just ain't gonna happen. Seriously, that's a ridiculous amount of clavo to have in the county jail. Where do you even secure something like that? It's gonna take a lot of trunks to secure all that D. That's a lot, probably around 12 people. You know, in the past, the most I was able to get in was a zip. And trust me, that was considered to be a lot. But this was more than a pound. So these guys were definitely trying to get their money's worth. So imagine this, as Deputy Meiser's on the tier being propositioned by Benji to bring in all this contraband, his partners that were also part of Operation Safe Jails were in another part of the jail monitoring phone calls and intercepting conversations that were coming from other inmates that were housed on the same tier as Benji. You know, coincidentally, they just so happened to take an interest in 2 calls that they had flagged. 2 calls that were made by somebody that was considered to be a close associate of Benji's. In this particular call, this guy recites a string of numbers to a female facilitator that initially didn't make any sense. He recites 18, 27, 32, 64, 19, 23, 14, 5, etc., etc. But here's the thing, coincidentally, earlier that same week, during a routine search, apparently they had intercepted a key that enabled them to decipher and figure out this code. Nothing in the report specified where they found this key at, but the way that it was written up, it led me to believe that they found this key in Benji's cell. And when I say key, for those of you who might misconstrue what I'm talking about, I'm not talking about the kind of key that you stick in the door to open up a lock. I'm referring to the type of numerical or alphabetical key that basically allows you to figure out a coded message. Here's an example. Using a numerical key like the one in this story, let's say your code was 20, 17, 13, 17, 17, 42. Your key to break this code would be the corresponding letters that represented each number, which would obviously spell out no good. When they hear this guy recite out all these jumbled numbers, these deputies had been working around gangs long enough to know that this was obviously part of some type of intricate code. Then it occurred to them that the key that they had found a week prior to that in Benji's cell, that might actually be part of this message, or it might be the key that might help them figure out this message. When they looked at both of them together and they decoded the message, it read, "I need you to go buy 2 cans of Pringles chips. Take some out, then split the package that girlfriend gives you in half. Put half of it in each can. Then put some chips over the top and seal it to make it look brand new." At this point, ICIB, Internal Criminal Investigations Bureau, got involved as it became clear that Deputy Meiser was involved in some type of illicit conspiracy to bring in illegal contraband into the LA County Jail. How it was going to be done, when or where it was going to happen was still unknown at that point. However, the one thing that was clear was that it was definitely in the process. So based on these phone calls and this decoded message, investigators from an FBI task force were able to get a court order to place a tracking device on Meiser's 2018 BMW 530i. And basically from that point on, a surveillance team was assigned to follow him. When the FBI task force got involved, by this time the investigation had kicked into high gear. And several investigators from different agencies took notice of a series of strange phone conversations that appeared to be coded up, made by Benji and some of his associates. Investigators were also able to determine that other loose phrases were also being used in an attempt to disguise the true context of what they were talking about in their conversations, also known as carnival talk. The phrase "white Jordans" was a coded message referring to Chris. The phrase "Black Jordans" was a coded message referring to Black. So at one point, while investigators were observing Meiser inside the county jail, they observed him hand a close associate of Benji's a bedroll and a bag of something else believed to be contraband. So at that point, it was already clear that it had already made its way into the county jail and that Miser had definitely been compromised. Technically, they could have stopped the investigation right there and made the arrest on Miser if they wanted to. But after all the agencies that were involved made a collective effort to continue on with the investigation until they had more evidence on Miser, they just let it go. So later that same night, the same day that that package made its way into the jail, investigators overheard a conversation where Benji was thanking a female for taking care of that favor for him. And she responded by saying, "Now it's your turn to shine." So a few days after investigators hear a series of phone conversations that contain more jumbled numbers and carnival talk, they then end up following Miser to a Valero gas station in Lancaster after his shift was over. When Miser gets to the gas station, they observe him get out of his car and approach the driver's side window of a red SUV. At that point, somebody in the driver's seat hands Miser a Sprouts grocery bag containing what's believed to be contraband. He then walks back to his car and then he drives home. So the following morning, on April 30th, 2024, Miser drives to his partner's house, Deputy Munguia, and then the two of them get in Deputy Munguia's truck and they carpool together to the jail. So when they arrive at the parking lot in the jail, the surveillance team observes Deputy Miser get out of Deputy Munguia's truck, unlock a police car, pop the trunk, and then place a Sprouts bag in the trunk before entering the jail. So at some point, Miser enters the jail and he starts his shift. And while he's working, he ends up texting another deputy that he didn't necessarily care for. So he asked this other deputy if he can go down to the parking lot and drive his car into the secured area of the jail because he was too tired and he felt too lazy to do it himself. However, this other deputy ended up texting him back telling him that he couldn't do it because he wasn't at work that day. He was basically throwing this guy under the bus. He wanted him to drive that vehicle into the jail that had the D in the trunk. And later when Deputy Munguia would be interviewed, he said that Deputy Miser, he didn't care for this other deputy. He never liked him. And it was highly uncharacteristic for him to ask him for a favor. So he was throwing him under the bus. But unbeknownst to Miser, the game was already over. Because as he was texting this other deputy from his post in the jail, the surveillance team was in the parking lot searching the vehicle. So when the investigators popped the trunk open, they found a plastic Sprouts grocery bag containing 2 sealed cans of Pringles chips. Aware of the fact that this conspiracy somehow involved 2 cans of Pringles based on the coded messages that they had deciphered, the investigators opened up the 2 cans of Pringles, dumped out a thin layer that was on the top, and located 2 plastic wrapped cylinder-shaped blocks of glauber. So when Miser's shift was over that night, him and his partner Munguia got in Munguia's truck and they drove away from the jail. When they were driving, the investigators had a black and white light them up and make a traffic stop. So later on, when Munguia agreed to be interviewed, he described what happened at the time that they were lit up by this black and white. At the exact moment that they were pulled over for this traffic stop, Munguia said that him and Miser looked at each other and they started laughing. They started laughing because they thought that this was some kind of skit, that this was a training exercise. Miser actually asked Munguia if they were serious or if they were bullshitting. Initially, it was just a police cruiser, but once they stopped, they had deputies from everywhere run up to their vehicle with guns drawn and ordered them to get out of the car and lay on the ground. Munguia said Miser again said, "Man, are they bullshitting or are they serious? They look like they're serious." Then Miser said, "Man, they ain't bullshitting. They're dead ass serious." I'm sure at that point, Miser kind of figured out what was going on and he shut it down and he refused to be interviewed. Smart man. Munguia, on the other hand, didn't know what was going on. He wasn't involved. So when they asked him if, he'd consent to an interview, he said, "Hell yeah, I'll talk. I don't know what's going on." So once the investigators told Munguia what was going on and why they had been arrested, in hindsight, everything started to make sense to him. The rapport that Miser had with certain individuals, his excessive interaction with Benji and others that were closely associated with him. Munguia said that whenever him and Miser would walk on the max tiers, that he could literally hear the inmates whispering that it was Miser. Miser was on the tier. Meiser was walking down the tier. A lot of them were probably sick, and they knew that relief was just a few minutes away. It all made sense now. Munguia even said that according to what he's seen, that Deputy Meiser was living way beyond his means. That he was living beyond his means as a deputy that was employed by the LA County Sheriff. He had a white BMW 530i, an Infiniti, and he was also building a custom Ford truck. You know, the other thing that Munguia said is that most of his training came from Meiser. When he got there as a rookie, Meiser was the one that trained him. And that even though he was new and he was still learning, that he noticed that Meiser had a lot of unconventional approaches for dealing with the inmates. For example, Munguia said that him and Meiser understood that they could never completely stop these guys from committing acts of violence. That's something they'd never be able to stop at the jail. But Meiser said at least they can mitigate it. Meiser even told Benji that they were okay with them meeting out their discipline, their physical discipline, but that as long as no deputies got assaulted and that they didn't catch any bodies, that it was okay. And according to the reports, Benji even explained the extent of their physical discipline. He said they have what are called 13-second checks, llegadas, for minor acts of misconduct, and that these 13-second intervals increased from 13 to 26 to 39 to 52, depending on the seriousness of the infraction. And for the most serious of offenses, they had what were called smash outs. You know, Meiser said that he agreed to this with Benji, but Munguia said that he felt like they were giving the inmates too much control. You know, in the end, Munguia said that this is how Meiser trained him. So he thought that this was how it was being done across the board. This is how everyone was doing it. So the night that Meiser was arrested, they found $10,000 worth of cash in his work bag. And then when they searched his house, they found another $15,000 in his sock drawer. In his sock drawer, not his boxer drawer, but his sock drawer. You know, and although it's not illegal to keep that much cash laying around, it is highly uncharacteristic because most people keep that kind of cash tucked away in a bank account. You know, I'm sure that's probably not going to help Meiser in court either. Not when he's been charged with attempting to bring $250,000 of black into the LA County jail. Anyways, I just wanted to share this story with you guys. It perked my interest when I ran across it, and I just thought you guys might take an interest in it as well. Like I said, these kind of stories are common all across the country, in county jails and in both state and federal prisons. Everywhere, COs, deputies, and correctional officers are always being propositioned, and everyone knows there's a lot of money involved. But this story was unique and a little different based on the amount that these guys were trying to bring in to the LA County jail. $250,000 isn't no chump change. That's an astronomical amount by any comparison. So I had to share this one with you. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Paradigm Profiles. If you guys like this episode, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like this episode, give it a thumbs down. But either way, drop a comment and let me know what you think. As always, I just want to thank those of you who continue to show your unwavering support and for also continuing to tap into the channel. With that said, you guys enjoy your day. Keep pushing that positivity. Until the next one, this is your boy B, and I'm gone.